I recently moved back to Phnom Penh, which is the capital of Cambodia. It is in Southeast Asia, right between Thailand and Vietnam. It's a tropical country which is warm year-round and really only has two seasons, wet and dry. We're currently at the cusp of wet season, so I really wanted to go for a hike before it got too impassable. We started by taking a 2-hour-long drive out of the city in a van that was very much overpacked. The ride was pretty jumpy because the roads are very unstable here. When we finally arrived, we finally took a walk up in partially paved path up to the first waterfall. There wasn't too much vegetation in this area, thankfully. It was mostly just trees. But later on, you definitely noticed a lot more plants, vines, in general, just not as kept up as I'm used to trails being. However, you could hear the waterfall from about a quarter mile away. And as we approached, I just got more and more excited about being able to see what counted for a waterfall here. The first waterfall wasn't too big and was only reachable after a quick rock scramble where I had to put my camera away because I absolutely would have lost it otherwise. Although the group leader said that we just needed a pair of casual sneakers, I definitely would recommend hiking boots for this trail. Probably either hiking boots that are waterproof or a pair of Birkenstocks to change into, because not only were there a lot of areas where you were climbing up boulders or up pretty sheer rock faces, but there was water everywhere. The waterfalls are actually all connected through one river that just goes throughout the mountainside, and there are actually 7 waterfalls in total. However, the 7th one is an especially difficult climb, so we only saw about 6 and we swam in 3. This first area was where I really got the sense of how different it was to go hiking here than in the States, because I'm used to hiking around Georgia, specifically North Georgia, and pretty much everywhere that you go has painted lines to show you where to go. You don't need a group guide to take you there. You can pretty much traverse it on your own, no help. I'm used to hiking on my own because of this. But here I definitely needed and appreciated having a guide because I definitely wouldn't have known where to go. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to tell which areas were safe to swim in, although they technically all were. The waterfalls were all going through these nice flat rock areas. So for the first area, we stopped and had lunch, which was maybe about 1 kilometer away from where we parked the car. There was a little waterfall towards the end, and the water was full of really small fish that would nibble at your toes if you sat still for too long. The water was kind of clear, not the same as the swimming pool, of course, and the rocks were very, very slippery, both getting into the water and just climbing up this rocky area. Where the moss grows, it's pretty much like Vaseline, and when it's dry, it's a lot easier to traverse barefoot or with shoes. So whenever we were climbing over rocks or doing any scrambles, it was a necessity to either keep your shoes on so you could have traction to get over those wet areas, and you'd have to just deal with having a wet shoe, or try to stick to the dry areas. One of the group members brought their dog, Odin, who absolutely loved the hike. I think in part because there was no other dogs out here. He knew to stay close to the group, and so it was just a very nice place to bring a dog. I kind of wish I had my dogs here from the US because they absolutely would have loved or hated being able to swim like that. As we continued walking, I really couldn't hold on to my camera with my hand as per usual because of just the amount of trip hazards. I had to keep my gaze downwards to make sure that I wasn't stepping on cow dung, which was surprisingly far up on these trails, as well as making sure I didn't step on a loose rock. As you might have seen in my previous video, there was a path, a bridge of sorts that I thought was a collapsed bridge, but no, it's a footpath to get up to the 2nd level, as the hikes are all gone by levels. This was level 1, there's level 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I definitely think it was worth getting to the end, even if some of these areas were a little bit difficult to figure out. We were supremely lucky that the weather was not too hot. It was overcast all day. It was still, as per usual, in the 90s, but without any rain and without any direct sun. There wasn't too many insects out, and overall it was pretty comfortable. My main discomforts with this trip were just that I was underprepared. I didn't have any of my usual hiking stuff, and I kind of decided last minute to do this, so I didn't have the correct type of hiking bag that I normally would, I didn't have snacks on hand, and I definitely wish I had had a better pair of shoes, especially ones that would have been better for all the water crossings that we did, or better suited to just in general the terrain. I do think that this was worth doing, particularly because it gives me a good standard of what it's like to go hiking in this country, and definitely lets me know that solo hiking is probably not in the cards for me. The differences in vegetation were also pretty interesting to me because there were a lot of bamboo. There was a lot of trees that I just weren't familiar with. And so despite, green trees, forest being a familiar environment for me, just the specific things that made up the environment were very, very different. The path here was a little bit more clear, but there was always things hanging from above. There were stray vines, there were so many things, although I was surprised that there weren't any fruit-bearing trees because previously when I'd gone on drives or hikes in deeper Cambodian country, there were things like durian trees or coconut trees just out there in the middle of nowhere, and of course no one really cared if you took one. I do think that this hike put me into closer touch with nature, like actually touching it, because typically when I'm hiking, you're kind of on a set path. In Georgia, at the very least, there's like stairs, or like where they have like the wood that's put into the dirt to keep it in place, or there'll be handlebars, or there'll be like squares pointed on the trees, and there's park rangers who will cut down anything that gets too much in the path. And that's not the case here at all. It's pretty unkempt. The closest thing you have to groundskeepers are the people who are at the parking area who will sell you water or snacks for relatively cheap. So I definitely had like leaves touching me, branches getting stuck in my hair, having to watch out about things hitting you in the face from the person in front of you. We were really lucky in that we were all wearing bug spray, but there weren't any bugs that were biting us. I was a little bit nervous about potentially getting malaria or dengue fever, but I didn't really see any insects at all. The most wildlife I actually saw this entire time were the tiny fish who were swimming in the ponds that we were basically swimming in, as well as the little green things that were growing in there, which again was pretty interesting because I've been to rocky beaches before in Italy, I've been to some in other places, and the fish here were really curious. They weren't, like shying away from you walking in the water. You had to actively kick to keep them away. My favorite waterfall of them all was this last one, which was pretty difficult to get to the top to. There's another swimming pool at the top, and you have to like scramble up the rocks to get there. And when you get to the top, you can definitely see some evidence of other humans having been here. There's always a little bit of litter. There's a couple cigarette butts, whatnot. But overall, it's not nearly as debased as many places are on hiking or camping trips. I absolutely love this experience, and I think that if you ever have a chance to come to Cambodia, this is something that I would put at the top of my list of recommendations.